Welcome to the NanoCap podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of NanoCap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of NanoCap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. This week we have David Moss, the CEO of INmune Bio, stock ticker INMB. INmune Bio is a leading biotech company that focuses on modular components in the innate immune system to activate a response against cancer and Alzheimer's. David, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Will, thank you so much for having me. We really look forward to this.
So, David, usually I start on someone's LinkedIn page to kind of see a little bit of their background. But for yours, I had to dig a little bit deeper and go to your Bloomberg page. And you've had quite a kind of eclectic background of different business experience since graduating from Rice University. So tell me a little bit more about kind of you graduating from Rice, where you wanted to initially take your career, and kind of how it slowly led you to in the biotech category.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So I've always been in biotech. You know, one of our family friends when I was growing up was one of the founders of the second biotech company ever, a company called Hybridtech, which actually invented the monoclonal antibody. And he's really one of the guys that I got very interested, one of the guys responsible for getting me very interested in. So when I was at undergrad at UC San Diego, biotech was just starting up in San Diego. And obviously San Diego at the time was the second largest biotech city after San Francisco. And it was his leadership that led me off to Houston, where I went to Rice, and I did some tech transfer work and biotech work when I was doing an MBA out there. And it was from there that I started my journey in biotech. I fell in love with it. Nothing better than obviously being able to help patients, families, and it's incredibly rewarding experience to develop drugs that can make a difference in people's lives. And then obviously it can be a good career as well. So that's what I started doing about more than 2 decades ago. I love it, and I wouldn't change a thing.
And were you tempted at all to stay in school and just start researching and thinking that's kind of your best path, or you always have a business mindset where you're like, go to market is kind of where I want to be?
Yeah, you know, more of an operations financial person is how I started, very much a value-oriented economics person. And then I fell in love with science. I hung around with a lot of scientists, a lot of very smart researchers. And as I did that over time, I started to read papers. I started to learn a lot. And, you know, cutting edge science is really about sharing knowledge and reading, frankly, and then talking to scientists about what they're working on. And that's really where I kind of got my science background was in the work that I was lucky enough to do with some very, very important scientists. Like at INmune Bio, we have a fellow named Professor Mark Liddell. Mark is a genius when it comes to science, and I learned a lot from him.
Oh, I bet. And so you were working at a VC firm for a little bit, and then you helped a company get acquired by a PE firm. And so you kind of got to dabble in kind of both sides of that business. And then eventually down the line, you hear about 10 years ago, you hear about INmune Bio. What was the first inklings? Did you hear about it? Did you hear about it at a conference? Did you read a paper and you're like, ooh, this sounds interesting? Kind of what was the genesis story of you getting started there? And since you're there from the beginning, the genesis of INmune Bio.
Sure. So I co-founded the business along with Mark Liddell and one other person. And we started the business in the idea. Actually, we started the idea in 2014, really around modulating the innate immune system. You know, you have two sides to the immune system. You have the adaptive and the innate. Most drug development in biotech has been around the adaptive side of the immune system. Very little's been done on the innate. And that's partially because there's really no animal models in the innate immune system. And so, as you know, most science starts with an experiments in a professor's lab with animals, rats or mice or whatever it may be. And then it moves from the bench side to hopefully clinical trials. You can't do that with the innate system, so there wasn't a lot of research done in the area to start. But we knew that it represented about half of the immune system in our body. And so we always looked at it as if you're do a great job on the adaptive side of the immune system. It's like sending a boxer into a boxing match with one hand tied behind his back. He'll get some punches in, he'll do well, but it's hard to win the fight. And so we wanted to bring the innate immune system. And so all of our platforms that we developed were around modulating dysfunction in the innate immune system. And one really interesting tidbit that I think is important to note is that the vast majority of the animals on this planet don't even have an adaptive immune system. And yet they deal with things like cancer and infection and viruses and so on, only with their innate immune system. So the innate immune system is really our first line of defense. And then the adaptive immune system kicks in. And so that was really the reason we started the business, and the reason we call it INmune Bio. The I and the capital N is really to focus on the innate immune system.
And so did you know that there was going to be some sort of solution hidden in there in the other 50%, or did it kind of start out exploratory and then more and more findings are figured out? I'm always infatuated with the idea of a company like yours starting, and then how crazy biotech has moved forward in the last 10 years. Yeah. And so how much of it is you all just like, you're onto something and then there's wind behind your back and so you just keep going that direction, or if there's different breakthroughs along the way that allowed you to pivot to where you are now, or kind of, did you have the original idea in the very beginning, or has it changed throughout time?
So interesting question. We started with the idea really leveraging on CAR Ts. So at the time, just before we founded the business, there was a lot of work with a company called Juno and Kite Therapeutics that were developing CAR T therapies. They were the first to really do it. And we were enamored by the results, but we were a little bit confused about how they were going to make their drug, because it's a very expensive and complicated process. And so what we decided to do was focus on technologies that would allow us to do drug development where we could make it for the masses at a reasonable cost and modulate the immune system. And that was the creation of INmune, which is what the company was founded around. We also had a secondary platform, which we had interest in, which is called Expro. And we knew that chronic inflammation was a big driver of many diseases. And so we wanted to have a platform where we could target a broad variety of diseases with chronic inflammation. That was Expro. And those two platforms are really what kicked off the company.
And so we've danced around it a little bit, but in your own words, what does INmune Bio do?
Yeah. So our core value proposition is really quite simple. We have two product platforms today. Well, we have three product platforms today that modulate the innate immune system. The furthest along is a product called Chordstrom. And what Chordstrom does is it is an allogeneic mesenchymal stromal cell platform that modulates inflammation, and it helps with tissue repair. It's a program that finished a late-stage clinical trial in an ultra-rare disease. It's in pediatric disease. And this program is going for submission for approval in the United States and Europe second half of next year. The second value proposition for the business is around Expro. We just completed a phase 2 trial in Alzheimer's disease. And we're taking all of that information, which we're still gathering, putting it together, and we're going to submit it to the FDA for what's called an end of phase 2 meeting. That end of phase 2 meeting will help us get regulatory alignment on hopefully a registration study for Expro and Alzheimer's disease. So the clear value propositions are approval of a product that we'll submit for approval next year, along with the setup for hopefully a trial that allows us to get potential product approval in Alzheimer's. Both very, very, very big markets with markets in need, which we can discuss a little later.
Yeah, let's get into the market size a little bit, because I'm curious how you balance that as the CEO, where you have something like Alzheimer's that you can go after, where it instantly gives an instant reaction to almost everyone, because someone knows someone who's had to go through it, and how devastating it is just from watching from the outside even, and how like visual it is and how emotional it is, and going after something like that with a giant audience. Or there's these more, I won't say like orphan drugs, but these more kind of, you said, more rare things that these children have to go through. And yeah, what's your thought on it? Is it find a distributor for the big ones and then focus on the smaller ones because you know you can make an impact and Pfizer's not going to focus on this specific solution? Or how do you balance all that?
Our real goal is to get these products across the line, and then to figure, and during that process, what happens is that the marketing really solves itself. In the case of the ultra rare disease, which is Chordstrom for what we call RDEB, it's a great product to start with because it's a small market with what we call sites of excellence where you would distribute the product. So you're not talking about large volume distribution and complexity. So it's a great product to learn to launch. However, in the rare disease category, if you do launch a product and get approval, there's plenty of companies that will want to partner with you, or you'll be able to do distribution. So we don't have to reinvent that wheel, and that's most likely the path we will follow. With regards to the Alzheimer's product with Expro, you're talking about a very different animal. I mean, you're talking about millions of people in the United States that need this therapy. You're talking about probably one of the largest untapped market needs in the United States. The administration has recently been talking about it as a large unmet need. And like you said, everybody knows somebody that's either a direct family member that's been affected by it or a friend's family member. And so if we have a solution for Alzheimer's disease or a drug that makes a difference in these patients' lives and therefore their families, we'll almost certainly have a partner to help us with that. And it's, you can count the partners that have the capability of doing that distribution on, a couple hands, let's say. There's not many of them around the world, but they're all very well known.
So we can cut this part out, but this is just by my curiosity. I'm from Minnesota originally, and so
Sure.
I read all about this University of Minnesota professor there who basically just made up decades worth of Alzheimer's data.
Yep.
Has that affected your roadmap at all, or do you guys read that and go, what the heck?
Yeah, no, I'm glad actually brought the question up because, Alzheimer's has affected so many people that there's been a lot of desperation. And unfortunately, there's been some businesses out there or some people that have done research that hasn't been of high quality, and it's diluted the quality of quality research. It's a very challenging and difficult disease. And unfortunately, there's just some groups that don't do good science or take advantage of people's needs. It breaks my heart, and it really upsets me. But it makes our business more difficult because what it means is that there's less people to believe in what we're doing because it gets diluted by a false message, really. But our science is solid. It's real. We understand the MOA. We understand the patient selection. We understand what's going on with the patients. We understand how our drug's working. There's a lot of unknowns in Alzheimer's disease, and part of designing and running trials is to try and reduce those unknowns. And it's the reason why you have a phase 1 and then a phase 2 and then a phase 3. So the phase 1 showed safety and a little bit of efficacy, and then phase 2 you're trying to show in a randomized, blinded way that your efficacy is real. You may not know the total population is right. And it allows you to define your population for the phase 3, and that's really where we are. So, good question. There's a lot of, let's call it, snake oil pseudoscience out there. I even see these ads for a particular product, which I won't name, that says, take this and improves your memory. I don't think they ran a proper clinical trial, but they're able to do it. I don't know how the FDA allows that, but there's just, we're trying to do real science here.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not too off base. If people want to look into it, just Google Alzheimer's University of Minnesota hoax or fraud or whatever. You'll find out more
There's
information.
lots of it out there.
But it's very, very tragic.
It is tragic, and I'm sorry that it's out there. But we need to, poor scientific papers can set off decades or years of going down the wrong rabbit hole, and in some cases,
the money.
Yeah, it can disallocate funds to the wrong researchers. There's a perverse incentive, and I wish it wasn't the case, but it's just part of the nature. I wish there was actually more consequences for that being done.
So as you get through, as you said, phase 2, phase 3 for the Alzheimer's drug, would you figure out that you are susceptible to Alzheimer's through your DNA when you're like 40 and start getting on this therapy early or do you get it once you're diagnosed? And then, yeah, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. No, I know where you're going. You're talking about preventative. So there are ways to get an early diagnosis to see if you might be have a higher likelihood of getting the disease. There's a thing called a genetic testing. You can get tested for the gene called ApoE4, and if you have that, your incidence of getting Alzheimer's disease as you age is higher. And so you can start to prepare for things like that. Unfortunately, to do a prevention trial is long, complicated, and expensive. It's not likely that anyone would really ever go down that path, because you've got to pick people that don't have the disease and then do a trial and see how many to get the disease, which means you usually got to go large and long, and that means big money.
That's like 25, 30 years.
Yeah, it's just not possible. I mean, maybe in the future somebody could do that. And there's these meta-analysis that show that if you do certain things, your incidence is down from getting the disease, et cetera, et cetera. For example, if you keep your weight off, you don't become obese. But unfortunately, our drug and the trial is such that you already have the disease, and we want to catch the disease early, and in hopes that we can slow the disease progression down or even potentially stop it. That's where our trial is focused, not on prevention. That might be something for somebody else long down the road, but it's not for us.
And so then, tell me about then. So say someone does have Alzheimer's. Is it a one-time shot? Is it a come back every year, get it done? Is it, how do they get it? And does it slow it? Tell me a little bit more about how it, in a perfect world, how it would go.
How it works and so on. So we believe that what happens is as you age, you get an increase in inflammation. And we call it chronic inflammation in the body, but we call it neuroinflammation in the brain. And wherever you have neuroinflammation, you end up getting accelerated degeneration or cell death. So, for example, think of an old person. Their muscles are weakened, their skin is thin, their eyesight is poor, their memory's not as sharp. That's really neuroinflammation, and or chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is more than half of deaths are attributable to some chronic inflammatory disease. Now, we believe that neuroinflammation in the brain drives a lot of different neurodegenerative diseases, not just Alzheimer's, right? We think it drives Parkinson's and ALS and depression and autism and traumatic brain injury, for example. There's just this degeneration. A simple way to think about it, for example, Will, if you had a fever and I said to you, go write a detailed research report on INmune Bio, you'd be like, it's hard for me to think clearly right now. I don't think I can do it. But, a week later, your fever's gone. You can go punch that research report right out. That's neuroinflammation, all right? You have the fever, you have neuroinflammation, and you're kind of foggy. So what happens is as we age, this neuroinflammation rises, and then you get this slow growing, rumbling dysfunction over time. You don't feel it, you don't know you have it, you can't see it, but it's causing this low grade cell death, and it's increasing as we age. And what we want to do is we want to disrupt that process biologically. So what our drug Expro does is it knocks down the key ingredients of neuroinflammation, and it does it without immunosuppression, which is really important. And we believe that'll slow down, maybe stop a lot of the cognitive decline or the neurodegeneration that occurs in that process. And so, our belief is that the treatment is something you take for life. It's not something you're one and done. Most complex diseases, once you get them, you usually take a medicine for life, especially if you're talking about something that modulates the immune system, like what we call an immunotherapy, or even our drug really modulates the immune system in the brain. It's something that you have to keep taking, for the rest of your life, like many immunotherapies. So it's a once a week, kind of like a sub-Q injection. It's like an insulin shot. You take it once a week, and you would take it for life.
All right, this is the time where I start asking the dumb questions.
No such thing.
So, say you want to do your phase 2 or phase 3 study on Alzheimer's. do you put like a ad out in a newspaper saying we're looking for Alzheimer's
Yes.
patients, or like where does it start? And then you have to do this big like almost like it seems like a trying out for like a movie. We have this whole waiting room, and you come in, you have to ask them about the medical background if they meet the right thing. Is that how it goes? That's how it goes in my head, but I assume it's a lot more complicated and strict.
Yeah, so there's a process in the United States, because it's healthcare, there's a lot of rules and regulations around how you recruit patients into clinical studies. And there's the most important thing really is informed consent, making sure that the patient fully understands the drug, what the complications are with the drug, the side effects, et cetera, safety issues. And then, they have to agree, obviously, to enroll. So what we do is there's a whole network of sites that do this for as a profession. And clearly there's many patients that have the disease, and there's many passionate caregivers and daughters and sons and mothers and fathers that are looking for solutions for their loved ones that are suffering from this disease. So generally what happens is they'll go to these sites. They may research it and find it on their own, or they might see an ad about it, and then they'll go and they'll talk to a clinician. And the clinician will tell them about the various trials that might be available or the various drugs that might be available for treatment. And then they make their own decision. So it's not as an aggressive a marketing campaign like you're trying to sell a new sneaker or something like that. It's really a well-controlled process, and there's professional firms that we really contract with that do this.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, it's one of those things I've heard people mention it over and over again, and then I had to think about it, like, where do you find these people?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sometimes, for rare diseases, sometimes it can be difficult, or diseases that have a lot of competing products can be difficult. But in the case of Alzheimer's, there's really no great solutions out there, and there's millions of people that suffer from it. So recruiting is not hard. Recruiting the right patient can be a little bit challenging, though.
I can imagine. Well, as we wrap up here, David, thank you so much for your time. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What gets you excited about the next 5 years? Where do you see it going? What gets you pumped up?
Yeah, a lot of things. Like, we're on the cusp of submitting a drug approval for a disease that affects children. There was an article in the BBC about one of the children that was on our trial, and the motivation when you hear the results of how it changed this child's life and what his parents thought is more than enough to get out of bed and say, hey, I got to get this drug past the finish line. The second thing is that, my father suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and just like you said at the beginning, everybody knows somebody that has. If we have the chance to make a medical breakthrough that could potentially change the lives of millions of families, and notice I say families, not patients, because it really does affect the entire family. How could you not be motivated to get out of bed to say, hey, I can potentially make that change? And so I'm motivated to figure this out and to make this happen. And it requires really good shareholders to support us. It requires scientists to understand what we're doing. It requires a really good team of dedicated employees that we have to help us push this over the line. And I feel confident that we can do that.
Well, if my listeners want to learn a little bit more about INmune Bio, where should I send them?
I would say, great place to start is the website. And then on the website, there's a little YouTube link. There's a handful of videos out there that we put up over time. And as always, they can just they can reach out to the company either through our email address or on our phone number. We're happy to chat with investors about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
Thank you, Will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefor by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast Express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.